Dear participants, today is the 16th session of this national workshop on research methodologies in geography. And it is indeed great pleasure to welcome and introduce Dr. Sanjukta Sattar ma'am. Ma'am, on behalf of all the organizing institutions and on behalf of all the participants, I welcome you for this session on collection of primary data, techniques and significance. I am sure you will enlighten to all the participants, and participants will carry some additional ideas and will apply in their research work. Before going to start the session, I would like to invite Asta Kapoor to introduce today's speaker.
Okay, it is a privilege to introduce Dr. Sanjukta Satar, Madam. I'll begin with the introduction. It is a matter of pride and honor to get the opportunity to be able to address this noble audience, and especially the pleasure doubles when I stand here to introduce our speaker and resource person for today, Dr. Sanjukta Satar, Ma'am. I extend warm greetings to one and all present in this webinar and wish everyone a very good evening. Our resource person and speaker for the day is a distinguished scholar and an exemplary expert in her field. She has an empirical mindset and a perpetual urge to enhance her knowledge base by acquiring new skills to adapt better in the changing contemporary times. She is proficient in a variety of research skills and teaching techniques, owing to her sound background in the field of geography. She is presently serving in the Department of Geography at the University of Mumbai in the capacity of an associate professor, head of the department, and a PhD research guide. She completed her master's and MPhil degree courses from hugely renowned Jawaharlal Nehru University and went on to pursue her doctoral research in the subject of geography from the esteemed University of Calcutta. Owing to her brilliant finesse and competence, she has she was awarded the National Scholarship, and she even cleared the UGC's prestigious exam of NET, National Eligibility Test. She is fervent and thoroughly devoted to her subject. This can be understood from her areas of interest, which lie in urban spatio-spatial segregation and exclusion. Next, housing and homelessness, urban mobility, tourism geography, place branding, and creative economy. She specializes in urban geography, social geography, cultural geography, and tourism geography. These sub-branches of geography are taught by her with utmost diligence and dexterity in the Department of Geography of Mumbai University. She has a rich teaching experience of 15 years in Calcutta, which is inclusive of her service at the Department of Geography, Gokhale Memorial Girls College and Alia University, Action Area 2, Newtown, Calcutta. She has served for nearly 7 years in the Department of Geography, University of Mumbai, Vidyanagari, Kalina, commencing her teaching journey in this department in 2014. To her credit, she has a vibrant research experience as well, wherein she contributed 7 papers in the edited books, 17 papers in research journals, and 1 paper in an international conference proceeding. She actively participated in and presented 18 papers in national and international seminars and even authored a book titled Tourism in Sikkim, India, Impact of Economy, Society and Environment. Professor Satar is a keen educator and also exhibits a propensity to continue the teaching learning process. She has attended 12 workshops and training programs and has been invited as a resource person to deliver 9 talks cum lectures across India. This hints towards her popularity in the research community and among the worldwide academicians. Besides this, ma'am is a compassionate and down-to-earth soul and maintains an elegant, accommodating and supportive disposition. Her acumen, sensitivity, insight and wisdom are her pronounced assets which accentuate her charismatic persona. Her credentials speak volumes about her interest in academics and research. Her passion and zeal towards her subject are immense and unending. In today's webinar, she shall be sharing with us a portion from her vast knowledge by delivering a lecture on the topic Collection of Primary Data, Techniques and Significance. Respected ma'am, it is indeed our honor and privilege to have you amongst us today. I hereby extend a very warm welcome to you on the behalf of staff and students of ASP College Devruk, Ratnagiri, and all the revered dignitaries and the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Astha.
Thank you, Astha. Thank you. May I request to Dr. Sattar, ma'am? Please, ma'am, continue. Please.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Dr. Patil. Thank you so much, Astha, for that elaborate introduction. I'm really overwhelmed. What should I say?
You're more than welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Patil for giving me this opportunity to share with you all a little bit what I have gathered over these years. And also I look forward to learn from you also, because I believe in academics we share knowledge with each other, and that should be the motto. So today I will be speaking or sharing my, what I learned or what I experienced about while doing my research. I will be speaking on primary data collection. Now, I'll just share my screen first. Let me just. Is it showing now?
Yes, ma'am.
It's showing now? Okay. I'll make it full. Yeah.
Yes.
So today I'm going to talk on collection of primary data, the various techniques used for this primary data collection, and what are its strength, what are the limitations, and how important it's this collection of primary data as a part of the research. Now, primary data, all we know is, all of us are knowing what is understood by primary data. Primary data are those data which are generally collected by the researcher themselves, and there are various methods and tools for collecting primary data from various sources. Now, this primary data collection is very important. Means not only primary data, data collection as such is a very important step in the research, because if there is a flaw in the data collection and if we don't get the proper data, it will be having lots of implication on our research itself. So at the outset, we should know what sort of data we need to collect, and depending on the type of data we need for our research, we will be going for whether primary data collection or secondary data collection, or sometimes we need both the data, primary data, and to support the primary data or to get the background picture, we refer to the secondary data. But primary data collection involves various methods, and we are going to see today what are these methods and which method should be applied when. So as I started with, like, primary data is the data which are collected by the researcher themselves. So these are the first-hand data, and these data are the one which are collected for the first time for some special purposes. Now, primary survey or collection of this primary data becomes essential when there is no secondary data available. And also, like, we need some very special particular type of data for our research. So it is the data which is mainly collected by using various well-defined methods and various data collection tools. Now, this method of collecting primary data for research in, I mean, it is not only used in geography, but in other subjects also. But in geography, we'll see what sort of methods we use, and we'll see that the methods we use in geography is also like some of the methods which we have borrowed from the other disciplines also. Now, in geography, the primary data collection is very important, both in human geography and also in physical geography. But there is a difference in the methods used for data collection in human geography compared to what is used in the physical geography. In case of physical geography, the methods which are mainly used for data collection, these includes, like, we go to the field, we do the measurements using various instruments. Observation is also there, and also sample collection. These are the main methods. Now, in case of human geography, the collection of primary data is done through mainly like we conduct socioeconomic surveys using tools like questionnaires, or it may be structured or semi-structured interview schedules. Also, conduction of interviews, in-depth interviews, then focus group discussions, then participant observation and ethnography. These are the various methods of primary data collection in case of human geography. So in today's lecture, like, I will be mainly discussing the various methods of primary data collection in human geography. Now, as I said, like in case of human geography, conducting questionnaire survey is a very important method. Questionnaire survey and also use of interview schedules. Now, what are these questionnaires? Now, this questionnaire survey itself is considered to be one of the very important method of survey in human geography. And for conducting various studies in human geography, interacting with and talking to people, this is very important. It's a very important part. And these people to whom like the researcher interacts with are the main object of the study. And this, how they interact, how the researcher interact with the respondent, in what ways the researcher is collecting the information from the respondents is according to, there are various methods of that. And the most commonly used way in which the geographers have obtained information from individuals or the, what we say, respondents, has been through the formal questionnaire surveys. Now, use of questionnaires in geography, this was popularized when analysis of people's geographical perceptions became a very important part or a major part of geographical studies, especially in the field of behavioral geography in the early 1970s. And subsequently, questionnaires were being extensively used in a range of other areas of human geography also. Other researches conducted under human geography, and it became one of the key means for obtaining the primary data. And as part of many geographical investigations, this questionnaire survey became one very readily identified stage in the process of data generation. And then further, once the data is obtained, then it is analyzed using various quantitative or statistical techniques, or maybe if it is quantitative data, using some other techniques. So here comes another thing, like data which is collected through this questionnaires may be quantitative data or maybe qualitative data. Now, excuse me. Now, through this, so question is, the researchers collect both quantitative data and qualitative data. Now, when do we collect quantitative data? If the need of the research is there, like, if the research needs quantitative data, then the questionnaire should be structured in such a fashion that the quantitative data can be collected. So the questionnaire should be standardized and the respondents should be selected very carefully using appropriate sampling techniques. Now, if the questionnaires are completed by the respondents themselves, So that is one way. And another way is like, when the investigator or the researcher asks the question to the research respondents and they reply and then they note down. Now, when the respondents themselves are completing the questionnaire should be very carefully framed. It should be self-explanatory and there should be no ambiguity. Okay. And other than that, like, if the researcher wants himself or herself to note down, so that is like, we can say that is called the interview schedule. So it may be a structured interview schedule, it may be a semi-structured interview schedule, or it may be just some sort of interaction without a schedule. So this is again done like when the researcher or the investigator wants to ask the question directly to the respondents in an interview situation and note down the answers on the questionnaires. And such, as I already said, such questionnaires are called structured interview schedule. And so in this case, one advantage is that, like, because the researcher is already present there. So if the respondent is having any queries or not sure about any question, so that clarity can be achieved, or the researcher can give or explain, the explanation can be given by the researcher. So like, this using this questionnaire, how this questionnaire can be used for the survey, it can be used either through this face-to-face interviews, or again, this questionnaires can be the questions can be asked by the researcher over the telephonic also, over the telephone. So through telephonic conversation also the questions or the questionnaire survey can be conducted. Also, the questionnaire survey can be conducted by post or by email when the questionnaires are sent and the respondents are expected to fill it up and return or mail back. Or sometimes like the researcher drops those questionnaires to particular places and then they request somebody who is there in charge, like, to collect the questionnaires. Maybe if a person is doing a survey about the tourists, so the researcher can leave the questionnaires maybe with the hotel manager or some travel agents. So who will be filling up, who will be distributing the questionnaires to the tourists, and they will be requested to fill up the questionnaires, and then it will be kept at the desk and from where the researcher can collect. So that is also another way. And then there is another way, like, nowadays what we do because of this pandemic, we are using Google Forms also to do our surveys. So that is also another way of questionnaire survey. So from this, what we understand that questionnaire plays a very important role in the sense that it provides a very rapid and often a very inexpensive way of discovering the characteristics and the beliefs of the population in large. So this diagram, from this diagram, you can understand how important or what role the questionnaire plays. Now, before we frame the questionnaire, some sort of research or some sort of study about the background has to be done, and then only we can come up with a good questionnaire. Now, the questionnaires, as I said, may be structured questionnaires or semi-structured questionnaires. And when the questionnaires are filled up by the respondents, then it is questionnaires. Otherwise, if it is like the researcher is writing down the answers, then we say, when we call it as interview schedule. Now, there are some similarities and some differences between this interview schedule and questionnaires. Like, both have questions related to research problems. Both are having structured questions. If it is a structured interview schedule, if it is a semi-structured, then it will not be fully structured. And if it is just an interview, like, then the researcher might be having some guidelines with him or her, but it won't be in form of that structured questions. Okay. Now, in both the cases of questionnaire as well as structured interview schedule, same set of questions is asked to all the respondents. Okay. So this allows comparability. Now, and so it allows the researcher to compare the results. Now, questionnaires also should be careful while in both the cases, care should be taken to avoid vague and ambiguous questions, and also like both needs a pilot study to be conducted. Now, the main difference between a questionnaire and a structured interview schedule is that questionnaires is already, which I am told, is filled by the respondents, themselves, whereas in case of interview schedules, it is the enumerators or the investigator or the researcher, he or she herself or himself fill the interview schedule on behalf of the respondent. Now, this questionnaire consists of a series of written questions with alternative answers, whereas the interview schedule is a formalized set of questions and sometimes statements also, like, whether you agree or what do you think, like that, about their opinions, and spaces are left for the answers to be noted down by the investigator. Now, sometimes here let me mention that the answers, with the permission of the respondents, sometimes recording is also done. It is not always the researcher use pen and paper to note down, but with the permission of the respondent, they can record their answers also. So now this gives again a very clearly differentiates the questionnaire and the schedule. The questionnaires, can be also delivered by post or mail. As I said, that is another way of conducting questionnaire survey. Obviously, the respondents have to, they themselves fill up the answers. Now, because, the questionnaires are sometimes sent by mail, or it's left with at the desk of many, like as I gave the example of a hotel or a travel agent office or any office for the respondents to fill up. So that's why it is like, depends on the respondents whether they are willing to fill up. Then a constant follow-up sometimes is needed. So that it is seen that the response rate is sometimes low, because the researcher may not be always be present to encourage or tell the respondents to kindly fill up the questionnaires. It depends on the respondents. But here the coverage is large. If the researcher want to cover a large number of respondents, if the sample is very big, so this is the way it is appropriate. Also, it is found to be economical. And because you are just taking out the prints of the questionnaires, or it may be soft copies also when it is sent through emails and all, and it is sent. So it is much economical, and definitely how well the questionnaire survey is successful, like how appropriately, how the answers have come in the questionnaire, how good the questionnaire has been filled up by the respondents, all depends on the questionnaire, the framing of the questionnaire. That is how good the questions are, how much the questions are with clarity. It is pinpointed. It is not ambiguous. So that the success of the questionnaire survey absolutely relies on that. And definitely this type of survey one can be conducted when the respondents are literate, and obviously they are going to cooperate. Now, in case of interview schedules, like the investigator themselves go to the field and they note down the answers. So, the response rate is high because they themselves are there to explain and to also gain the confidence of the respondents, and really get their confidence and get the answers from them. Okay, so definitely the response rate will be high, but it's not always high. Sometimes it all depends. Here again, it depends on the investigator or the researcher, how well he or she is able to interact or communicate or convince the respondents. Okay, so this is comparatively expensive, because the researcher has to go, stay there, spend more time, so that there are a number of expenditures are there. So it is comparatively more expensive. And as I already said that the success relies on the competency of the investigator, and definitely on the honesty also, whether the investigator is actually, if the researcher himself or herself goes to the field, definitely they will be doing the survey. But sometimes if the researcher, if it is a very big project, some assistants are hired, and if they are actually not going and conducting the questionnaire survey, and so that honesty also matters. Okay, so the honesty and the competence of the investigator, all this matters regarding the success of this survey. And this type of survey can be used in case of both, when the respondents are both literate and illiterate. So this is here again, it becomes quite clear like what type of survey, what method of questionnaire survey, or whether you want to go for interview using structured interview schedules you want to go. So all depends on like not only what is your study topic, but also who are your respondents, who are your target population, whom you are going to study. Now, all this hints at the framing of a very good questionnaire, like all the success of this survey and the how successfully you're able to gather the data all depends on framing of a good questionnaire. Now, so a questionnaire, good questionnaire, what will be the aim of the good questionnaire? It will be to make sure that all the questions asked address the aim of the research. The question should not be like anything. It should be focused. It should be, yes, sometimes we have to give certain questions to get the background. Sometimes we have to ask certain things indirectly because we know certain things asked directly, we may not get the answer. But it should be all aligned to the aim of the research or the topic of the research. Now, designing of these questions, how do you frame the questions? That also matters a lot. Like, first and foremost, like already, what type of information do you need? Your research demands whether more of quantitative information or more of qualitative information, or you need both. So accordingly, you have to frame the questions. Okay, like if you want quantitative information for doing quantitative analysis, going for modeling, you plan to go, you will be already, before you frame your questionnaire, you will be preparing your proposal, and there you will be having the aims and the objectives of the research. So aligning with the objectives, you will be framing your questions. So by the time, and also you have decided upon the methods that you plan to use. So that will help you to frame the types of questions, or at least you will be knowing what type of data you will need for your research. So whether you will be framing hypothesis and you want to set the test the hypothesis, what sort of quantitative analysis you want to do, what sort of modeling, if you want to go for some modeling, then you need quantitative data and you have to frame your questions accordingly. But if your research requires only people's opinion, their experiences, their feelings, it is absolutely qualitative. So you need more qualitative information. Maybe you will be needing a little bit of quantitative information also, but more focus will be on the qualitative information. So again, your questions will be framed, should be framed accordingly. So the question should be framed such that you get a much better understanding. And also sometimes, as I said, when we use the mixed methodology where we use both quantitative and qualitative, to frame your hypothesis also, you need some qualitative information. So that for that also you have to keep some questions. So you're defining, and how do you define your questions, how do you frame our questions depend on all this. Now another very important thing in our questionnaire is the language we use. It is mandatory, or it is like, you should follow this use of simple language. Means here you should avoid all sorts of technical jargons. You will be keeping the language very simple. Now, language should also be appropriate, especially if it is a questionnaire and you are leaving the questionnaire for the respondents to fill the questionnaire. Okay. So you should not be going for those technical jargons which everybody may not be knowing. If that person is not from that field, may not be knowing. So you should keep those terms which is understood by everybody, and also the language should be simple. Then even like when you're going for the interview schedules also, suppose if you are having such sort of technical terms, it is expected that the investigator, while asking the question, simplifies it. It is not necessary, it is not hard and fast that you read out the questions as it is. So the investigator, judging from the competence or the level of literacy or the background of the respondent, will be modifying not the concept or the main question what is being asked, but the language or the expression rather, how the question is to be expressed. So that has to be judged. So the language matters a lot. And another very important thing is that there should be no ambiguity in the question. There should be no vagueness. The question should be with full clarity. It should be pointed questions. Okay. Yes, sometimes we use the questions which we cannot ask directly. So to make it more polite, or uh, uh, make it make the respondents comfortable, but that doesn't mean it will be ambiguous. It should be, and especially when you are writing the questions for the questionnaire, which the researcher or the investigator is not there to clear the doubts. So the question should be without any doubt, without any vagueness. It should be direct. Okay. So it should be for one example I can cite, like if the question is, do you like the design, speed and quality of the vehicle? So here you look, so many things are there. Now the respondent may be, will be confused whether to mention about if suppose the respondent likes the design but is not happy with the speed, and the quality, some sort of satisfaction is there. So there is no scope, if there is no scope of options, like if the question is specific, do you like the design? Do you like the speed? Do you like the quality? Then it is specific. But if you leave it like this, it becomes more ambiguous. Okay. So this sort of question should be avoided. Now another is like, how regularly, suppose you're doing some health survey, how regularly you visit a clinic or visit a doctor. Now this regularly, regularly for one person maybe like every week, one person it may be every month. So, this vagueness should be not there. So it should be like, instead this question could have been asked like, how many times in a week or how many times in a month you have to visit a clinic, like this. You have to be specific. Another thing is the length of the questionnaires, okay. Length of the questionnaire as well as the length of the questions also. So generally the question is, if the question is very long, it is very discouraging for the respondents. Like if you just try to put yourself in the place of a respondent, and if you get maybe a 10 pages or 15 pages questionnaire to fill up, and so that itself will be very discouraging. So the length of the questionnaire should not be very long, and the questions also should be short, clear, to the point, and all the unnecessary questions which is not actually needed, not very related to the research topic, or which is not going to generate important data that will be used by the researcher, those questions can be omitted. Another important thing is how you frame the question is regarding ordering of the questions, the sequence of the questions. How do you put the questions? If you put it very haphazardly, whatever is coming to one's mind, if you put it in that way, the questionnaire will look very haphazard. There will be no coherence. So, but a very coherent questionnaire with the questions which is linking one to another, and in a proper order or sequence, that will be a good questionnaire, and that will actually help the respondents also to answer in a better way. So the question should be progressively and logically arranged in the questionnaire. Okay. And generally the first part of the questionnaire, you can put like little bit about the background of the respondent, the place from where he or she belongs, the community belongs, the language known, the educational background, and a little bit about the family size or something like that. Then you come to the main point, the main theme of your research, and then you can ask questions. So first part of the question generally talks about the background, and the second part will be covering all the questions related to the main theme of the study. Now, how elaborate will be the background, that also you have to decide depending on the requirement, whether those background information is needed by you, whether you are going to check, suppose you are doing research on the occupational pattern or the occupational shift of the population of a certain region, or maybe a village, or maybe 2-3 villages. So obviously you will be keeping the first part, the background, the second part focused on the occupations, what was their past occupation, what is their present occupation, and also like why they have shifted. But you will be in the introduction part also, you will be keeping those questions that actually will be helping you to analyze the data which you have obtained related to the occupational shift. So whether there has been a shift, the shift is more seen across various social groups or gender-wise. So in that case, you need the data, the gender-related data. You will be needing the age group-wise. Then you will be needing the educational qualification, educational level of education-wise. So that those information. So you have to judge what information you have to keep. So this, and also the sequencing, like the sequencing, as I said, it should be very logical. And also, if you just start right away at the beginning of the questionnaire, with the right away the core of the research, core theme of the research, sometimes the respondents actually little time should be given to acclimatize him or her to the answering those questionnaires. So it is always good, like you start with little bit of introduction and then go to the main part. Or if your research topic is related to very sensitive issues, so if you start right away with those sensitive questions, it might discourage the respondents to come up with the actual answers, or you will find that many of the questions are left blank and like that. Okay, so it is always good to start with, if the theme is bit sensitive, so you start with less sensitive, then you gradually move to the more sensitive. Even while conducting the interviews, like when you are using an interview schedule, structured interview schedule, so that is the way, like you should first introduce the topic, and then you ask the respondent to give his or her introduction, and then you gradually move to the main topic or main theme. So this is how you order or sequence the questionnaire. Now, another very important thing is the ethical issue in the questionnaire. Like whatever information, like you are collecting from the respondents, that should be kept confidential. First and foremost, you should have to take their permission if the questions are related to very very personal or sensitive issues. And that also generally we avoid, like when we are doing the research, we avoid using the name of the persons, so the actual name is not disclosed. And taking the consent is very important if it is dealing with certain very sensitive issues. And otherwise also, one should like tell what is the purpose of your research and what you are going to do with that data. So all these things comes under the ethical issue. This also has to be maintained. Like, and also when you are doing a questionnaire survey, that is the respondents are filling and sending you a data. So you should assure them that data will be used only for academic purpose or academic research, your research work only. This data will otherwise not be used for any other purpose. Okay, this assurance, and this one line generally we write in the questionnaires. Okay, so these are the various characteristics of what we consider to be a good questionnaire. So for making a good questionnaire, these things one has to keep in mind. Now, before we frame the questionnaire, a lot of work is there. Before, you just cannot right away, you cannot one fine day you decide I'm going to do a research on this topic and you start framing a questionnaire. It cannot be done so. So before framing the actual questionnaire, one should do a bit of research, a bit of exploratory research. So what are the things you need to do? Like, you have to check and decide the information required. What sort of information? Okay, you decide upon the theme of your research. Why do you want to have the rations with you? Like, why do you want to take up this research? Going through the various literature, you do a literature review and you identify your research problem, and then you jot down like what are the information you need. So then you will also need to identify the target respondents. Fine. Who are the target respondents? Whom you are going to ask these questions. Then also the methods, the methodology part. What methods you plan to use, okay, for doing your research. Or another very important thing is how will you reach your target group, or how will you reach your respondents. So that also you have to decide whether you will be conducting a face-to-face interview, or whether you will be going for a questionnaire survey. You will be leaving the questionnaires with maybe as I said, in the hotels for the managers, or if you're doing some of the survey of the people working in particular types of offices or particular occupations, so you will be living with their employers or in their office. So, or if you're doing a survey on the schools, the education. So you will be dealing with the school authority or school principals or the teachers. So you have to, or you will be doing face-to-face interactions, a face-to-face interview, or whether you want to do some focus group discussions. All these things we will be discussing in detail, or whether you want to do in-depth interview. We will be picking up a few of them and then talking to them elaborately. Okay. So whether what method you want to use, that also you have to decide. Now, based on all this, your questionnaire, suppose you want to go for this face-to-face questionnaire survey. So then you frame the questions accordingly. But if you decide, no, I want to prepare the questions, and because I need more samples, so I have to leave the questionnaires, or you want to send, like, during the pandemics, there was no scope of doing face-to-face interviews, or doing a questionnaires, face-to-face, using interview schedules and directly interacting with the respondents. So we have to either do the questionnaire survey over the telephone, or maybe through Google Meet, or through Google Forms. So accordingly, the questions has to be framed. So that we have to decide the framing of the questions, what should be the question content, how the wording, the language, order and format, which I've already discussed. Then definitely the length of the questionnaire. Once you prepare the draft questionnaire, you just check the length. Now, once the draft question is ready, do you think that will be your final questionnaire? No, we have to conduct a pilot survey, or you have to pre-test the questionnaire. And once after doing this pre-testing, and you identify the flaws in the questionnaires, or after doing this pre-testing or the pilot survey, you will be able to know which question is not really important, or you're not getting the answers for a particular question, or you will be coming to know that a particular question needs to be reframed, the wordings needs to be changed. So all these things you will be understanding. And also with, not only we just, from the pilot survey, we just collect the data, but we also analyze. And there also sometimes we come up, identify that some sort of more data is needed. This should also have been asked. So we add to the question, to the draft question, after we identify all those flaws. And then only we come out with a final version of the questionnaire. Now, this figure, shows what I just said: problem definition, then search for the, also we, before the framing of the questionnaires, we do a little bit of background study to identify our target population also. And for that, you need to refer to some secondary data also. Also, some sort of exploratory interviews, like those who know about those themes. Suppose the theme, like you are working on, suppose some industry, like if you're working on carpet industry, or if you're working in the some educational field. So you might be having some sort of interview, small interviews or talks or discussions, like what are the issues, what are the problems faced and all. And then you will be trying to incorporate those things in your questionnaire. And also similarly, the review of the personal experiences and that of the, others who are in the same field. And then once that is framed, then you can prepare the, even before writing the objectives also, this sort of pre-field study needs to be done. And this will only help you to frame suitable objectives, or frame the hypothesis, and or develop the research questions also. Okay. Now, the types of questionnaires, already we have discussed a little bit on the different types of questionnaire, like if the data, quantitative data is needed more, or if the qualitative data is needed more. Now, one type of question is the exploratory questionnaire. Like it is like, if the data to be collected is mainly qualitative, or you need to know in details the information. It is, you are not going to conduct any quantitative analysis or using statistics and all. So, but you need qualitative data, you need people's opinions, you need people's feelings, experience. So then you will be going for this exploratory questionnaire. So this is a formal questionnaire and may restrict to the discussion and prevent a full exploration of the research problem. With this questionnaire, sometimes, like in this question also, sometimes some questions are added which will be adding a little bit on the quantitative information also. But other, like when the research demands more quantitative data, so your question should be more structured. Okay. And because you will be needing those data which you are going to test, we will need to test your hypothesis or do particular analysis, or you want to go for certain sort of modeling. So this questionnaires should be more structured and more standardized, because standardized in the sense like all the questions should be same. Like if it is not structured, it is semi-structured or not at all structured. Like when you move on from one respondent to another, maybe your questions will not be exactly the same. So, I mean, the comparison, like, when you want to go for the quantitative analysis, it won't be possible. So if you're planning to do quantitative analysis, if you want to test your hypothesis, you need the quantitative data, then you should have a formal standardized questionnaires. Now the types of questions that makes up the questionnaires. What types of question? Like, as I already said, sometimes you need qualitative information, sometimes you need quantitative information more, and sometimes you need both. So accordingly, we have the questions are to be framed. So for quantitative information, generally it is the close-ended questions or questions close-ended with options, or you have for quantitative, it is most of the times open-ended questions. Now, what are these close-ended questions and open-ended questions? Okay. Now, the open-ended questions or open questions, this allow the respondents to express what they think in their own words. They come out with all their experiences, their feelings, they relate their experiences, okay? So they are not limited, yes, the researcher may be putting one question and then the respondent is free to write as much he or she wants, or to relate or to tell, okay, her own experiences in her simple own words. The strength of this type of question is that it provides rich qualitative data, but one limitation is that it is a bit time consuming to collect such sort of data. Like, if you're going for this interviews and one respondent may be speaking for quite some duration, and or maybe some respondents, you'll find that they take some time to become more articulate. You have to little bit push them, you have to little bit guide them, you have to just make them more comfortable. Or some of them, they come out with lots of informations which you need to note down also. So, you cannot limit the time. So those type of surveys are more time consuming. So you have to decide, the time factor, do you have any time constraints? So in that case, how will you go? You will be going for, suppose you need some sort of qualitative data also, but you have some time constraints. So you will be going not for going for the just simple interview. You will be conducting the semi-structured interview, using semi-structured interview schedules. Or if you are having absolute time constraint, but you need to have this sort of informations and you need to have a face-to-face interaction. So then you will be going for the structured interview schedule. Because maybe your research demands that you yourself as a researcher has to interact with the respondents. You cannot just leave the questionnaires. So it all depends on the requirement of the research. So this open-ended questions are a bit time consuming, and also they are time consuming to analyze also, because if you have this close-ended like quantitative, you have the numbers and you do the run the those whatever you want. If you want to run regression, you do, or if you want to correlation, you do. You want to find the percentage, you can do. But for the qualitative data analysis, there are different methods. You have to read, and if you are audio recording the audio, you have to prepare the transcripts. So it takes time and expertise also, and you have to write down the notes again, rewrite the notes and all. So it is a bit time consuming. And also, in case of if it is closed questions, you have exactly what is your age, or what is your expenditure, how many years you're living. Okay, so you have the exact information. The respondent knows what to write. But if it is an open-ended question, everybody is not so articulate. that immediately the moment the question is placed in front of them, they will be writing down and start, the writing flow starts. Even when they're speaking also, some of them may be a little shy, they'll take a little bit of time. Some of them may not respond so well also. Some of them will be responding very well. So you'll get different types of respondents. So this difficulty in articulating the responses is one of the major difficulties faced while you are having this open-ended questions also. Another thing is like subjectivity, like respondents, they will be speaking from their viewpoint. Actually, that is what the researcher wants. What are the different viewpoints? But again, how the researcher himself or herself interprets what the respondents say, so it will be according to his or her viewpoint. So here, the subjectivity comes. How the interpreter is also interpreting what the respondent has said. So here, I mean, through what lens the researcher is looking at it. Okay, so that might, the same interview, when interpreted by another researcher, it may be interpreted in a different fashion. So this subjectivity problem comes also. But in case of the close-ended answers, it is objective. It is 2 means 2, 4 means 4. Okay, so these are the limitations. Now coming to close-ended questions, like, in case of the close-ended questions, is the responses are like, while framing the questions, you have to be very careful, and also like what response you expect. The response should fit to the pre-decided categories, and sometimes the responses are in form of nominal data, like it may be yes, no, okay, like that. Sometimes it is dichotomous, gender information, or yes, no, any other things also, like, when the 2 options are there. But if it is a list of alternatives are there, like you are expecting the list of alternatives, then it is like, polytomous. Okay. Now here there is another thing, like, this options. There's another way of asking the questions. It's a type of close-ended, but not fully close-ended. Close-ended with a number of options they're having. So that I'll come to that. But before I go over to that, like in the close-ended, there is again another type of data that is collected, that is called the ordinal data, or a ranking. Like, suppose you ask the respondent to rank a particular facility, okay, or rate a particular facility provided by the municipality, or like that. So, the ordinal data, and for that, or people's opinion, people's experience. Okay. So how will you do that? That is also done using the rating scale. Okay. So this is generally used to measure the strength of the attitudes or the emotions. And there are 2 methods. One is the Likert scale, and one is the semantic differentials. Now, what is the advantage? Like, the respondent can choose from, suppose you give a statement, okay, any statement, whether the respondent is agreeing, strongly agree. It can range from strongly agree to neutral. Neutral means neither agree nor disagree, like that. So sometimes the respondents are in that position also. So one option is there, then disagree and strongly disagree. So where a particular function, like if anybody is doing the survey on the transport facilities in a city, so you can have a series of questions, and whether you can get like the transport facility, like, there is, the frequency is good, in the bus frequency is good, or the local train frequency is good. So you'll keeping this option, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Okay. Now, what is the advantage of this type of scale, like Likert scale and semantic differential scale, which I'm showing in details. Now, the main advantage is, like, this is a Likert scale, and just let me show it first, then you'll get to know. Like, you have the statements here. There has been an increase in number of cars. The second statement, I would own a car. This is again a survey on a transport. People should use public transport more. Frequency of public transport should increase. Local authority should invest more on public transport. Okay. So this is a Likert scale. This is arranged along with the 5 scales, like starting from strongly agree, uncertain, disagree, and strongly disagree. Okay. Now, we get from this the ordinal data is provided, and this is the attitude continuum in which the respondents are given the 5 choices and they select one. So it may not be that for this statement there has been an increase in number of cars, they strongly agree. Here they agree. Whereas whether they would own a car or not, they are not certain now, like they are uncertain, not decided. So they will be ticking that. I mean, suppose let's take the example of one respondent. Then in case of people should use public transport, so that person is strongly agreeing to that statement, and the frequency of the public transport should increase, agree, and local authority should invest more, that also agree. Okay. So again, there may be some statement with that the respondent might disagree also. So this is how, like, the scale is generally 1 to 5. This Likert scale is generally 1 to 5 and 0 to 4 for scoring purposes. And this scale is applied to a series of attitudinal questions, like what is from this we can understand the people's attitude, like towards attitude about or opinion about the importance of the public transport, or what is the implication of the rise in the private vehicles, okay, in the numbers of the private vehicles. So this is basically to understand, the scale is used for understanding the people's attitude or measuring people's attitude for certain activities. And then after this, once this they get this for all the statements, the data is got, then the aggregate score can be calculated and used for the compared among the different how many samples you have, for how many respondents you have taken the survey. So this helps to make comparison between different groups of people, so that also you can do, like, whether there is a difference in the average attitude across class or across the place of their living or across occupation. So all these things, those studies can be done. Now, one difficulty is that, difficulty, yes, like you can say difficulty, but otherwise means you have to be careful regarding, like, when you're framing those statements or framing those questions, or otherwise you will not be getting a good result. Okay. Now, there is another such rating scale called semantic differential. Now, this is a psychological scaling technique, and these researchers use this semantic differential scales questions to ask the respondents to rate various products. And there are various forms or various methods how this semantic scale is used. Like, you have this semantic differential questionnaires containing at least 7-point scale. Okay. So it is like, it can be given from -3 to 0, then to +3 this way, or as I'm showing here. So it is ranging from good, that is very, fairly, slightly, neither, slightly, fairly, even towards bad. So it is bipolar. On the two ends of the continuum, you have two opposite adjectives. It is also shown graphically or through pictures also. So there is one example, and all of us have I am sure you all of us come across this type of scale. So this different types of semantic scales are slider rating scales, like, you can slide, there is animated scales, you can move the slider. Where do you want to give your, where do you want to how do you want to rate that facility, or what is of your opinion, or non-slider rating scale like this, or ordering scale also, like a high to low. Suppose you have the one end is high, other is low. Then you have satisfaction rating, like, this is showing with the picture, the smiley faces and all. So whether you are satisfied, slightly satisfied, partially satisfied, the pictures are showing. So this is how the rating scale is done. Now, so this is what the questionnaire is and how a questionnaire should be framed. And as I said, once the draft questionnaire is framed, it should be used when the researcher should go for this survey, the pilot survey for testing the questionnaires. So why this pilot survey is done? Pilot survey is mainly done to see whether the questionnaire wording is proper, whether the sequencing of the question is proper, or whether the questions are well understood by the respondents. Means everybody is understanding the question. It should not be so that a certain group of people is following the question, some group of people are having difficulty. So you have to then reframe the questions. Okay. And also, as I said, maybe some additional questions you now feel is to be added, or maybe some question needs to be removed. That is of no use basically. Okay. So, and also if any additional instructions are to be added, like if it is an interview schedule, so like, as a part of the guideline for the investigator, if any additional guideline is to be provided. So, and definitely the overall length. Suppose you have framed a draft questionnaire, and when you go to the field and you are conducting this pilot survey, you realize that it is taking too much of time because of the length of the questionnaire, or the respondents seeing the length. I mean, they are not having so much of time to spare. So you need to cut down the length of the questionnaire. And also that is affecting the interest or the attention of the respondents also. Okay, they feel they get discouraged or they get bored. So all this matters. So you have to reframe, cut down the questionnaires, make the question more sharp, more pointed and all. So all these things are possible only if you conduct a pilot survey or the pre-test, what you say. Okay. So this is all about the questionnaires. Now this is the questionnaire survey was one very, very important method, and for doing this collecting the primary data, especially for human geography. And there are other very important methods also, and those methods are used when there's a requirement, like, if your research topic requires that you need to interact with the respondents, interact with the people. Just going for the questionnaire survey is not giving you all the information. Okay, you need to bring out more details. So in that case, depth interviewing or in-depth interviewing and group discussions are advised. Now, what is this depth interviewing or in-depth interview? As one scholar has, described this in-depth interview as, although the interviewer guides the discussion, I'm quoting, although the interviewer guides the discussion enough to focus on the topic of interest, and the depth interview provides enough freedom for the respondents to steer the conversation, for example, to bring all sorts of tangential matters which for them have bearing on the main subject. So in-depth interview, through in-depth interview, it is possible because it involves, it allows more interaction with the people. The researcher gets to know more details. Okay, and when anybody is conducting this in-depth interview, so initially, as I said, in case of the questionnaires also, one should not jump directly to the main theme or the main research questions. So it should start with the initial period of introduction. Okay, so the introduction should be followed by several, like when you're conducting the in-depth interviews, it might involve a couple of sessions. It may not be just one session. So the first session, when the researcher or the investigator is meeting the respondent, that may be just an introductory session. Sometimes because of time constraint, we are not able to hold several sessions, but that will be good if we need more in-depth data. And then if you see, like couple of times, if they are interacting, the respondent also becomes more comfortable, and when the familiarity increases also, they come out with more information. So that is, if time permits, the researcher should go for a couple of sessions. Otherwise, you have to be satisfied with one session. Now, in a single session also, like first part, like you should first introduce the theme or introduce the topic, and then you ask the respondent to also introduce himself or herself, and then gradually you come to the main theme. But obviously, by the time you have introduced the topic, also introduce yourself and why you're doing the research, that should be made clear to the respondent. Then only the respondent will be feeling more comfortable. Okay, so therefore, it involves the initial period of introduction followed by several separate, and if it is possible, you can hold several sessions, or otherwise you have to go for one session. And how do you record this information? It can be by using just a pen and paper that way, and also with the permission of the respondent, you can go for recording also, the audio recording and all. But this has an advantage as well as a disadvantage. sometimes the respondents are free, they don't mind, and but sometimes the respondents become a little bit hesitant when they see that they are being recorded. If you're just writing down the main points, they're not so conscious. They are not so conscious. But when they see that their voice is getting recorded, whatever they're saying is get recorded, they become a little bit apprehensive. They become bit of conscious, and so they do not come out with all the actual things, the details. So in that case, like, a couple of sessions might be helpful. So once the respondent also gains confidence and develops some faith, like, yes, this is only for use for this purpose, this research only, and then they may be coming out with the many details otherwise which they would not have. So this is how it is done. And these sessions are generally unstructured. This interview which is conducted is unstructured. Like, you do not have exactly what questions to be asked written down before the interview. Okay, but the interviewer or the researcher might have some ideas, or maybe having some guidelines, like on what themes he or she is going to ask the question. And sometimes, like, the questions themselves come out from the answer of a previous question. Like, when the respondent comes out with a new thing, which something which was not known to the investigator before that. So then the question, when the investigator or the researcher weaves more question from that, maybe having more queries, so more details comes out. So that way the unstructured interview takes place. And the interviews generally extends over longer duration. And if it is a little bit for longer duration, yes, it is taking more time, it is time consuming, that is a limitation. But again, this is also helpful because more time is spent in interaction between the respondent and the researcher. They become more free and they talk freely. And sometimes, like, they become free and they keep on talking and they come out with lots and lots of details. And this enables the researcher to develop a deep insight about their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences. Now, in this case, like, another very important thing that has to be kept in mind is like selecting the respondents. Okay, this is also a very important preliminary task before you start your interview sessions also. Whom you are going to interview, who will be your target population. So careful selection of this key informants is very important, so that you are interviewing the right persons whose experiences, whose opinions, the information you're getting will actually help in your research. So that is also very important. And how the interview is conducted, that also very much depends on the skill and the competence of the investigator or the interviewer or the researcher who is conducting the interview. Like, sometimes the respondents, they become like so, they start talking and they become so encouraged to speak freely and they start talking. But the researcher, to some extent, if the respondent is talking something, coming out with information which is beyond the scope of the research, so then the researcher's role comes to steer the discussion towards, or to make it focused towards the theme of the research. Now, if certain things might help in the research, but certain things are, not going to help. So the researcher should steer the discussion towards the desired topic, but that doesn't mean the researcher will be limiting the respondent to speak, or researchers should not also provide the leading questions. Like, researchers should not put words into the mouth of the respondent that what he or she should tell. Like, it should be left to the respondent to answer. The researcher might be, sometimes if the respondent is not following or not understanding the question, the researcher should try to explain it, but that doesn't mean the researcher should lead the respondent to answer in a certain direction. Okay, it should not, that sort of biasness should not be encouraged, or researchers should not be biased or express her opinions or impose or overpower the respondent's opinion like that. Okay, so it should be like, you should steer, the researcher should steer towards the topic, but in a fashion like, it should not, I mean, misguide or misguide or, direct the respondent to answer in certain, give a particular answer, like, so that biasness should not be coming. Okay, so therefore the questions need to be very non-directive as possible. It should be neutral questions. Okay, it should not be like that. The question should not be such that the answer should always come yes or no, like that. It should be a non-directive. It should be absolutely direct to the research respondent to agree or disagree with it. Like one example I can cite, like, suppose anybody is doing research about the working condition of any offices or any occupation. So if the researcher wants to ask a woman employee, like, do you feel whether, the researcher actually wants to know whether there is gender-wise discrimination. So if the question is asked like this, do you feel discriminated by your employer because you are a woman? This is biasness is already there. Like, you are telling, like, being a woman, you might be discriminated. Instead of that question, if the researcher asks what type of treatment you receive from your employer, okay, so that will, like, more neutral. So, or if the question is asked in this fashion, are all employees fairly treated by the employer? Okay, so here if like there is gender-wise discrimination or any other criteria-wise discrimination, that will, the respondents might come out with that. Okay, so it should be left to the respondent to, you should not at the beginning only, you should not put it, the researcher, as a researcher, it should put it that yes, gender-wise discrimination happens, so is it happening here? So that is not advisable. So to get a more unbiased, to get the real picture, you can see. And once this interview and everything is completed, then these notes are to be rewritten, or the audio recordings, and then those things are to be transcribed. Now coming to group discussions. So this, we were talking about the individual interviews. Now coming to group discussions, it is like, when you need to discuss, interact with the group. So when do you need it? So for that, the group interviews are conducted. When you need to see how, what are the collective opinion, or how people interact among themselves over, or how people discuss among themselves over a certain issue. Okay, so the individuals in the group, so how you select the group? The researcher will select the group so that the individuals, the members of the groups, they share some common features. And the groups may be part of the pre-existing organizations. It may be some women organization, or some labor organization, or student organization, like that, any or some occupational sharing, practicing similar kind of occupation, or if they already have an organization. Otherwise, the researcher, according to the theme, may gather people sharing some commonality, like, whether they are practicing a similar occupation. So all the people are working on the same, like maybe on the same area. So same field, like if they are craftsmen, or they are carpenters. So all of them are brought, or they are doing some particular, working on some particular activity, like, but running some particular transport. Okay, so those group people can be brought together. So that sort of group, or they are victims of a natural disaster. All of them are victims of natural disaster. So like that, the group can be created by the researcher. And generally, the groups are not very big groups. It is found smaller groups. Smaller the groups, the better the the participation is. Like each member get a chance to interact. It's not that one of them is just keeping shut and are 2 or 3, they are only dominating the group talk. It's not that. It should not be like that. And what is the task of the researcher? The researcher's chief task will be to create a very trusting and cohesive atmosphere for the group discussions. Okay, and so for focus group discussion, if time permits, it may not be one session, it may be a number of sessions. Okay, but sometimes because of time constraint and the availability of these people, there is only one session held. Now there are 3 approaches of these group discussions. Like one is autocratic, one is democratic, and one is laissez-faire. Now autocratic is like this sort of is like when the researcher leads and directs the discussion. So it tends to focus on the researcher rather than the group. Like he or she is directing, like, yes, you discuss this, you tell that, would that, like that. Democratic is like, if this involves like some direction from the researcher is there, but only as a facilitator or only for starting the discussion or generating the talk. Okay. But it doesn't play a very dominant role. And in case of this laissez-faire is like, this is a method like the researcher stands back and observes, like he might be just introducing the theme and he just watches how those people in the group, the members of the group, they interact. So this is another method for primary data collection. Now coming to another very interesting method, this is also like, all these previous two methods are also mainly for qualitative data, collection of qualitative data. Another method is the ethnography. This is also a method of collecting qualitative data, and this was this origin of this method was in first used by the anthropologist Clifford Geertz. He defines this ethnography as, or doing ethnography is trying to read a manuscript, trying to read in the sense of constructing reading of a manuscript, foreign, faded, full of ellipses, incoherencies, suspicious and tendentious commentaries, but written not in conventional graphs. Okay, so this is how anthropologist Clifford Geertz has defined, or he explained doing ethnography. Like ethnography has also been used by the geographers, and Waifu, according to Waifu Tuan, ethnography is doing what involves observing people, participating in their lives and sharing some of their experiences whilst trying to understand their world and then represent it in terms as close as possible to their own interpretation. So from this you can understand ethnography is when the researcher gets immersed or researcher immerses himself or herself within a particular community or organization, become a part of them, become one of them, and in this process is able to observe, feel their experience, see them, and see them from very closely, like how do they lead their life, what are their practices. And this takes time. This is not done in a day or two. This takes time. The researcher has to stay with the group they are researcher is studying with them for a prolonged period, and therefore ethnography, like we can say, this is a very good method, like for those who want to do a very detailed study about a community, their life, their culture. So this is a good method, and as I said, like it involves the researcher immersing oneself in a particular community or organization to observe very closely the behavior and how the interactions, how do they interact. Now this approach, like the geographers, like, in the 1970s and 80s, the geographers are following this tradition started following this tradition, and basically it was introduced by the Chicago sociologists in 1920s, who wrote on urban ethnographies of the ethnic culture and cultural groups in the cities. And since then, it can be said that it started, the geographers started using it, and it is one of the, method used for collection of the qualitative data, and it became a, and it has a major influence from the cultural studies. Okay. And so this method, through this method, the researcher can understand the relationship and the culture of the society, and how the people live, how the people interact. But this ethnography is the method of, like, or the process of gathering this sort of data, qualitative data or anthropological data through fieldwork, as well as ethnography means to write down, or the end product, that is also ethnography, writing down the account of their observations, okay, in the form of ethnographic text. Now this method has both limitations and strength, because strength is that, through this method the researcher is able to get a very detailed and very rich detailed information and observation about the people, their opinion. And so this is also referred as thick description, and this is just opposite to the thin variety associated with the numbers, collection of only numbers or the numerics, like, so this gives a detailed picture about the community. And the limitation is that this is like, the ethnography, the researcher is experiencing it and writing down what he or she has experienced, what he or she has seen, like it is through the eyes of the researcher. So interpreting the interpretations of the members of the community. Okay. So again, this subjectivity matters comes. So this is one limitation, and also the other limitation is like it is definitely time consuming, and it time constraint is there. And so if there is time constraint, like it is difficult to do ethnographic research. Now, ethnographic approaches also are, a number of approaches are there, that is open versus closed settings, or overt versus covert ethnography, and active versus passive. I'll just quickly, I think I'm running short of time. I'll just quickly finish then. Okay. So the open versus closed setting is like, setting means the environment in which the group or the researcher will be observing the community. Okay. So open setting is like when the community is not a very open community, like it is easy for the researcher to just be a part or enter. There is no formal barriers as such to be a part of the community. Like if you are studying the a particular neighborhood, or studying the some of the fans of a particular club and like that. So it is easy in gaining initial access to the group, but it becomes harder, like because this is the open community, so it actually getting immersed in that community, like, you know, the researcher getting immersed in the community, getting the detailed information becomes a little difficult. Whereas in case of closed community, it is difficult to get into the community because there is a closed barrier, like they are the closed groups, like, you know, it may be some school or some cult or some particular occupation or some profession. So they are very closed community, and once the researcher manages to get into the community, manages to immerse himself or herself in the community, you get close with them and you get to know lots of information. So that is the advantage. In case of overt and covert ethnography, most of the ethnography is overt. In an overt approach, the ethnography openly stated there, or the ethnographer, like, you know, the researcher states their intentions, why he or she has come to the field, why, what purpose they are doing. And in that case, like, you know, what happens, it is ethically perfect, like it is ethically preferred. But once the respondents or the community comes to know, they become conscious, and once they become aware, like, yeah, they are being studied, they become conscious. So the real picture always may not come out. Now, another is the active versus passive observation. Active observation is when the researcher himself or herself gets immersed and becomes a participant, almost like a member of the group. So he or she is participating in their daily life. So that helps him or her to get more information, to get the feeling, okay, to experience the daily life, how the community experiences. And passive is like, you know, passive role researcher plays when researcher from a distance observes the members. Okay, so this actually allows more space for careful observation. At a distance, you're observing, you're critically observing, you're carefully, you're able to note down. But the group members, like, when they realize that they are being observed and studied, they may not behave naturally. So again, that will compromise the getting the real data or the actual data. So it all depends on the what type of study or what is the requirement of research, so which type of ethnographic research you want to go to. Now there is another way of collecting primary data is a participant observation. It is this is the alternative method to the in-depth interview. Like it is like, you know, as a participant, researcher as a participant observes the group he or she is studying, and then noting down those observations. Okay, now this method has been borrowed from the field of anthropology and sociology. So this is mainly noting down all the observations made by the researchers, and this again involves spending ample time with the group and the people, the group of the people, the researcher, the group they are studying. And so, but this also becomes a very important source of observation. Now, there are different forms of participant observation also. One is total participant, when the observer's role is concealed. Like the observer, the researcher does not reveal that he or she is actually observing them. He or she behaves like as if she or he is a member of the group. He has come to be to participate with them in a festival or something like that, or as a tourist. So he conceals his identity. The researcher participant, yes, when the researcher has to be both inside and outside, like, yes, he or she is participating, but at the same time, he is or she is also noting down, observing, and that is mainly for the purpose of his or her research. And the total researcher is like when the researcher tells that yes, that is the main purpose, and is not participating in their activity, but only doing the role of observing and taking down the notes. So these are some of the methods of collecting primary data, which I have discussed with you all. I'm sorry I have taken more time, I suppose. So with this, I just end my discussion.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. You didn't extend, and even if you extended for more than an hour, the participant will definitely enjoy it. It was really a great deliberation, and I'm sure that participants might have got an idea regarding the primary data collection, because in research, to reach the root of the cause of any incident or to the of the research topic, primary data collection is necessary, and to collect the primary data is an art. Sometimes we may face some,
many of the researchers, they have said it is rather than a science, it is an art.
Yeah. Just we will invite few questions, and we will conclude this session. All participants have commented and appreciated your lecture, and that talks about your deliberations. It is not necessary to say few words from my side. On behalf of all the organizing colleges, because this workshop is being organized by Mata Gujari College, Fatehgarh Sahib, Punjab, then Nagindas Khandwala College, Chhatrapati Shivaji College, Satara, and Gupte Jolekar College, Ratnagiri. And as per our schedule, Anup ji was supposed to join to extend vote of thanks, but just I received a call and he told that he is unable to join due to some circumstances, and he conveyed me that extend the thanks to you from all the colleges for your deliberations and sharing your valuable time with us. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable time and enlightening all the participants regarding questionnaire schedule and ethnography. It was really a delightful session, and on behalf of all the collaborating institutions, I extend my sincere thanks to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure sharing what I have learned through my experiences of going to the field. Like this discussions, actually the experience sharing of the experiences can go on.
Yeah.
But again, there is time constraint for everybody.
Yeah. That's considering the time constraint.
Yes.
We put only one session every day, so participants they may enjoy. Otherwise, it may be only the completion of the sessions.
I hope this was of some help to all of you. I mean, I'm sure many of the things you were knowing, but a little bit like, discussion, like which is understanding which method is to be used when. So, and this discussions should be encouraged, like, that, and also when you go to the field, you will learn more. Like,
yeah. Thank you.